So I am happy y'all could join us for the online board documents workshop. If I have not met you one-on-one, I'm Chelsea Summerlin, the ICFL's Digital Skills Library Consultant. Got a few other ICFL staff members on the call. You probably know most of them, but I'll make them introduce themselves anyway. We've got Allison, Clay, Doug, and William.
I can jump on first. I'm Allison Meyer. I'm the Public Library Program Specialist here at the ICFL.
I'm Clay Ritter. I'm the public library consultant here at the Idaho Commission for Libraries.
Um,
I'm Doug Baker. I'm the library technology consultant here at ICFL.
And I'm William Lamb. I'm the e-services program supervisor here at the commission.
Perfect. All right. Thank y'all. We are going to have a little fun as we kick this off, or at least I think we're going to have fun. And we're going to do a little true or false quiz. So William is going to go ahead and launch a poll up on Zoom, and you should be able to see those questions. There are 5 of them, so you may have to scroll here a little bit. I'll go ahead and read the questions off, and we'll give you all a few minutes to submit your answers here. So the first question is true or false. You are only required to post meeting notices. And then the second question is true or false. Meeting minutes are public records and must be made available to the general public within a reasonable time after the meeting. Third question, true or false? Libraries with an online presence are not required to post notices and agendas through a website or social media platform. Fourth question, true or false? Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, does not apply to local governments like libraries. And question number 5, true or false? PDFs of board documents must be accessible for people using assistive technologies. Oh, we'll give you all a few more seconds here to respond to that poll. And then we will end it and we will show the results here. I'm seeing 21 of 27 people participated. So if you want to get your answers in now, there's unfortunately no prizes, but you get bragging rights for getting these right at the beginning. You answer. Perfect. All right. William, do you want to go ahead and end the poll for this one? And okay, so first question here. This one was false. It looks like 91% of you got that correct. You are also required to post meeting agendas. We are going to talk more specifics later. Our second question here was true. Again, 95% of you got this one right. You can make your life easier by posting your minutes on your website. We'll talk about that here in a second as well. And then number 3, the correct answer for this one is false. It looks like we have 86% of you correct. If you have an online presence, you have to communicate with it. Number 4 is false, and it looks like 100% of you got that correct. Awesome. Yes, ADA applies to every government agency. Good job. And then our 5th question here is true. Good job again. 100% of you got that right. PDFs have to be accessible for folks with disabilities. We are going to talk about alternatives to PDFs here in a few, since it isn't the easiest to make those accessible. So we can go ahead and stop sharing those. And we are going to move on to our agenda. We are focusing on the narrow topic of board documents on the website. This is not a deep dive into all the specifics of Idaho's open meeting law or the Americans with Disabilities Act. So here's our agenda for today. We're almost through our introduction. From there, Allison is going to kick us off by talking about why this is important. And then we're going to get practical and talk about the what and the when for board documents with Clay. And then Doug will talk about the how and the where. If we have time, we're going to do a short demo. And then at the end, we are going to split into breakout rooms where you can get some hands-on practice time time setting up your own accessible document templates that you can use going forward. We are going to have time at the end to do a quick wrap up, and I will share a feedback survey with you all. Today's session is about an hour and a half, and we hope to get you out of here by 3:30 p.m. Mountain Time. The breakout rooms will not be recorded, but the main room where we are right now is being recorded. Everyone who registered will receive a link to the recording after today's workshop. If you have questions, please throw those into the chat and we are going to try to answer them as we go. If you have a more involved question, you can raise it in your breakout room as well. One final caveat before we get started. This webinar is for informational purposes only. None of us has a law degree, and even if we did, we aren't your lawyer. If you have specific questions that require a lawyer, you should ask one. We can't answer them, and ChatGPT definitely can't answer them, so don't ask the robot either. And with that all out of the way, I'm going to hand this off to Allison.
Thank you, Chelsea. Yes, I appreciate that disclaimer because we are going to be talking about laws right now. Most of what we're talking about today is really beyond best practice. It's actually a legal requirement. So there are both state and federal laws to be aware of when we're talking about these things that apply to you as government entities. So the first law that we're going to talk about is the law that applies to meeting notices and documents, and that is state law. Specifically, that's Title 74, Chapter 2 of Idaho Code, which is the open meeting law. And you'll see highlighted there the guiding statement from this law that the formation of public policy is public business and shall not be conducted in secret. So basically, you have to show your work. You can't just have a policy, you have to show how the policy came to be. So anytime your board is making decisions or deliberating toward a decision on library business, it needs to be in a meeting open to the public. And equally important, what we're talking about today, you have to let the public know about it. So Clay will get into those specifics, but Chelsea's throwing some links in there to sort of help you identify if you need to go back and reference these laws. We also really recommend the Open Meeting Law Manual from the Attorney General. It is a much easier way to it's in a Q&A format, it has checklists. It's a much easier thing to wade through than the code itself. And since we are focusing on the why, I will just mention that there are penalties involved here to be aware of. So if you make a mistake out of ignorance, the civil penalty is a fine of up to $250. However, if you knowingly violate the law that we're talking about today, the penalty can go up to $1,500. And then if you do it again, the fee increases to $2,500. And the important thing here to note is the Attorney General assesses those fines to the individual member of the governing body and not the body itself. So that means the library isn't paying that. The individual board member or employee would pay. And anyone affected can bring a complaint or a lawsuit. So in that open meeting law manual, there is a long list of cases as examples, and this isn't just an Idaho issue. We've seen cases in Oklahoma and Louisiana with patrons suing their libraries over open meeting law violations. So at this time that, as we all are aware, there's a lot of scrutiny on libraries. It's really important to slow down, pay attention to details, and have a plan in place for your board documents and processes. So now we're going to talk about the federal law that's involved. And this is the law that is about ensuring that your online content is accessible. So that is the Americans with Disabilities Act Title II, otherwise known as the ADA. And it was great that everyone recognized that that applies to you. I think a lot of the time, people will think about ADA in terms of physical access to buildings, but access to your online resources and information is also covered by this law. So as you'll see up on the slide, it requires that state and local governments to give people with disabilities an equal opportunity to benefit from all of their programs, services, and activities. State and local governments can't deny people with disabilities the chance to participate or make them participate in different programs than what is available to others. So just like making sure people with wheelchairs can get into your building, you need to make sure your online content can be accessed by people using assistive devices online. And this applies to every community. There's going to be people in every community who need some kind of accommodation to access your services. As of 2023 data, 13.9% of Idaho's population has some form of disability, and that is likely an undercount. So this is a very important, beyond legal requirements, it's just the right thing to do. There are also with the ADA penalties for non-compliance. The good news is that you have multiple chances to remediate and fix your website if you get flagged with an ADA complaint. And this is not like a hypothetical thing. This has happened to libraries, it's happened in Idaho. It's something to be very aware of. But if you don't do that remediation, the fines are pretty steep. Unlike for the state open meeting law violations, these fines would be assessed to your organization. And for a first violation, the fines can be up to $50,000. And then repeated violations can go up to 100,000. And we're just talking about civil damages. There can also be punitive damages that the court can assess if they decide they're necessary. And then the final why, that's another factor here, is insurance. Because even if you're not facing legal penalties, insurance companies don't want to represent organizations that are violating the law. So if your website is inaccessible, if you're not posting the right information, your insurance company could decide it wants to deny your coverage. So our goal here is not to terrify you. I know that's a lot. Don't just go deleting your website. It's very, very important to have that online presence for your community. But we just wanted to give some context as we're heading into how to actually do all of these things. And I don't see any questions yet in the chat, Chelsea, if anyone has questions. Otherwise, I will turn it over, I think, to Clay.
Yeah, if you have any questions that crop up while Clay is talking, you can put those in the chat and we can raise them, but we will move on to our next section.
All right, so let's dive into the specifics of Idaho code. So Idaho Code 74-204, subsection 1 states, notice for meeting and agendas shall also be posted electronically if the entity maintains an online presence through a website or social media platform. That means that if you have any type of presence online, whether it's a Facebook, website, whatever, you need to be posting those notices and agendas up on the internet to comply with the open meetings law. Be as transparent as possible, right? Like that's our big thing here is just maintain your transparency. If you don't have an online presence, you of course don't have to go create an online presence to maintain your transparency through the open meetings law. You need to post them in a place. You don't have to post them in every place. Now, again, transparency, right? So if you have the capability to post them in multiple places, I recommend that you try and be as transparent as possible. Don't hide them somewhere on your website. If you have the capability to post them, do. So, but you are only required to post them in a place. So, for posterity's sake, I would recommend your website because social media flies through. Some people might not see them, and you could be accused of posting them in the wrong place. Doug will get into the specifics of how. Charlene, what about the city's website? If you maintain an online presence through there, yes. Like that is you posting them there. Yes. If you have your own website though for the library itself, I would recommend posting them there as opposed to the city website. Okay, when to post notices. This one's really easy because it says basically everything you need to know on the slide. So for regular meetings, 5 calendar days. For special meetings, 24-hour meeting notice, unless you have an emergency exception. Executive session, 24 hours as well. Now, let's talk about emergency exceptions for a second, because I feel like sometimes people think like that that your emergency is the emergency. And when they're talking about emergency and the examples that they use, it's things like the dam broke and there's 50 feet of water headed towards town, or there's a wildfire that's about to burn down the library. Like those are your emergencies, guys. It's not, oh, I forgot to post it, so this is an emergency. Make sure it's not a clerical emergency, it's an actual emergency. Something major is happening. That's when you're allowed to, hey, we got to get this done because it has to happen. So make sure that you're following those, and you'll be good to go for your notices. What to include in a notice? Well, notices are pretty simple and straightforward. You need to put the date, the time, and the location, right? The where and the when. As specific as possible. You don't just say your library, say the street address of your library. Like you want to let people know where you're at. Um, Even though everybody in your town might know where your library is, they somebody from outside, if there's a reporter who's interested in your meeting or whatever, they might not have the specific street address. So make sure that it's there. Put the full date on there. You don't want to just be March 20th. Well, March 20th when? What, 1968? So, make sure that you've got everything on there. Um, you should also list where to find these things on the website. So I really recommend that if you notice somewhere on there, whether in a footer or a header or somewhere, that this is where you can find this information online. It really helps as well if you need to amend the agenda, or you have a board packet or something like that, that it would be helpful for the public to see. That just directs them right to the point. Is that a question just now?
Yes, Terry asks, so just posting the agenda is not enough?
Um, Trick question, because your your notice your agenda can serve as your notice, but your notice can't serve as your agenda because your notice doesn't list everything that is required for the agenda, technically, but your agenda should list everything that has to be included in the notice, provided you're posting it in time. So yes, Terry, I have seen libraries, cities, counties post their agenda 5 days before the meeting. They don't change the agenda. They don't give themselves that window. It has everything required for the notice. It has everything required for the agenda. That's what they consider it. I do recommend that you have a calendar list of your regular meetings, though, separate, so that people know when those occur throughout the year. When to post your agendas. So this is different than the notices, right? For regular meetings. For regular meetings, you've got 5 days for your notices. You have 48 hours for your agendas. Guys, the 48 hours is really important. If you read through some of those cases in the open meeting law manual, like if it's 7 p.m. on Monday and your meeting's at 5 p.m. on Wednesday, you need to move your meeting. That's just a fact. Like don't mess with the hours here. Don't mess with the transparency. For special meetings, and this is where we get into knowing the answer to Terry's question, right? Like special meeting is 24-hour notice, 24-hour agenda. Same thing. So most of the time you use the same document for your special meetings, your executive sessions only. Remember that on your executive session only, you need to include the reason and the legal citation. The reason and the legal citation are different. Your reason is your reason for holding the meeting. The executive citation meeting might be the it's what code you're going to use, but your reason is why you're using that code. So for instance, if you're having a special meeting to evaluate the director, you should list out the section of code that applies to for your executive session and then for director evaluation. Something like that. Again, just keep it transparent.
And then Liesl asked in the chat, on our website, should we link the entire board packet, financials, policy reviews, etc., in addition to the agenda and the minutes?
That is completely up to you. If you're putting your whole board packet up online and you want people to view it, by all means do so. It is a document you're posting on your website, so people will obviously have access to it, but are you required to? Not that I'm aware of. Okay, agendas, which I apologize, I already covered quite a bit of this, but the big thing to include in your agendas is your what. What is going on during the meeting? You know, your order of business, if you have a standard order of business, things like that. The big thing to remember is anything that's going to get a vote has to be labeled action item. That is very explicitly spelled out. If you have something and you vote on it and it was not labeled as an action item, you have violated open meetings law, which means you have to go through the curing process, which ultimately means that whatever you voted on never happened, right? So you've got to go through and fix it. So anything you have, if somebody wants to vote on it, it needs to be labeled as an action item. You need the title. So when we talk about title, is this a regular meeting? Is this a special meeting? Is this an executive session only meeting? The title of your meet, all of that. Time, date, location, just like your notice, and everything that you're going to be on your agenda. If they're just discussion items, they don't have to be labeled as action items. If they're action items, they have to be labeled. I realize I've repeated myself 5 times right there, but really, guys, do not vote on it unless it says action item. And then it is helpful to have a notice of your next meeting there. I really do strongly recommend it. Even if later on you call a special meeting, if this is a regular meeting, keep with your regular meeting or your foreseen meetings. Like if you're going to meet monthly or every other month, have that on your agenda. That way people know if they miss out, they can come to the next one. Okay. When to post minutes and policies. Well, your minutes have to be available within a reasonable time, right? So, let me answer Stephanie's question really quick because this is a fun one. I was told you can list everything under action items, then you can vote on anything they need. Is this correct? I mean, technically, probably. I don't recommend it because you're kind of telling the public that the board is deciding on all of these things, and then the board is not deciding on some of those things. And if somebody later on goes back and reads your minutes and there weren't votes taken for things that you labeled as action items, people might start to question things. Especially when it comes to a lot of things that libraries have on their agendas are really you as the director, if you're the library director, are having a discussion with the board about something. And it could be that they don't have the decision-making capability or it's out of their ambit. And you and they're giving you advice on a situation, but they aren't making a decision. They're helping you interpret policy, which is not an actual action for them to take. They're just helping you. I would not recommend that, Stephanie, but again, we aren't attorneys. So talk to them. What if the vote is to table the decision to a later time? That is an action that is taken, right? So that needs to be in your minutes. And and if somebody's making a decision, that's an action item, so it would already be labeled as an action item, right? Okay, back to when to post your minutes and your policies on your website. So your minutes and your policy, well, your minutes have to be made available within a reasonable time. What is reasonable? Well, it's reasonable. Like you don't be unreasonable. Be reasonable. I realize that I'm talking in circles here, but really that's what the law says is you get to interpret what reasonable is. If you Here's my advice. If you ever run into a situation with your minutes where you're like, I don't want to post these because, I don't want people to read them because I'm not like comfortable with like a decision that the board made, or we're going to revisit this decision later. I don't want people to get upset about this. You should have already posted them because you aren't being transparent about it, right? Um, I really think that posting them sooner than later, even if you have to label them as drafts, is a wonderful practice. If you have draft minutes and you're going to post them up and the board's going to see them beforehand and almost everything's in there, put great big watermarks all over everything. These are draft minutes, and then have the final approved ones later. Getting them up sooner is better than getting them up too late. If you wish to avoid public records requests, you can post both the minutes and the policies on your website. That way, if somebody asks, you can go, they're on our website. They're available, right? I do recommend having copies of both your minutes and your policies up on your website if you can. I realize that storage space is a thing, so you might not have the storage to be able to post all of your minutes throughout the history. If you only have physical copies, they require digitalization, things like that. Of course, those are all hurdles, but where you can, I would recommend posting your minutes and your policies up on your website. Okay. Minutes. What to include? Well, you have to have minutes for every meeting, so it is important to include that they are the minutes of that meeting. So stating what meeting it is the first step, right? That should be at the very top. This is a meeting of the blah 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 library at the blah 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 place at the blah 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 time. They have to include, they must include all members present of the governing body. I would recommend that if there are staff members present or something like that, that you list all of those people. Some places list all of the members of the public because they take a sign-in sheet, etc. That's up to you. All motions, resolutions, orders, ordinances proposed and their disposition. Plain speak. Everything that was brought to the board for a vote and how that vote went. So you need the results of all votes, the motions, and who seconded, all of that. The results of all motions, and you can include who voted what upon request by a member. You aren't required to. You could just put, motion passed or motion carried, motion passed, motion did not carry, motion failed. You could put that, but if somebody asks, hey, I want it to be noted in the minutes that I voted no on this, you need to do that. You need to make sure that the results of those motions are listed clearly. I recommend that you provide context in your minutes. And when I say context, I mean give somebody who was not at that meeting the ability to understand, at least in part, why decisions were made, what decisions were made, and what things were discussed. Sometimes the perspective really matters in these things. Think about, if you go back and read some minutes for some things that have happened in the past at your library or at another agency, and you're like, why is this even a thing? Why is this rule? What is going on? that historical perspective can be really important to understanding why something is the way it is, and giving the public or even a member or a future board member the ability to look back and see why that decision was made is very important. Giving context matters. So I strongly recommend giving some context. You don't need to transpose a recording, list absolutely every word that was said, but capturing the essence of your meeting is really important. So I do recommend more detail rather than less detail. So, and with that, I think I'm done. So, I'm going to give it
Almost.
over.
You're
Almost.
almost
What
done.
did I
There's a
miss?
question in the chat. Megan
Okay.
says, typically our draft minutes from last month go up in this month's packet and then final approved minutes when they are voted on. Should we be posting draft minutes immediately after the meeting?
Is it reasonable for you to do that? I'm sorry to answer your question with a question, Megan, but generally, honestly, like if it is reasonable for you to do that every single time, sure, post them when they're available. But if you can't, if your draft minutes are delayed by a couple of days, I would say that that is completely understandable. If it takes you some time to compose those, get them watermarked, things like that, allow for that.
All right.
Am I done now, Chelsea? Did I
You
catch
are,
up with the
yes.
questions?
You caught up
Okay.
with the questions. William has a comment in the chat that folks can read, but we will pass it on to Doug to talk about the fun stuff of the actual documents themselves and ADA compliance.
Thanks, Chelsea. Also, she's lying to you all. This is not necessarily the fun stuff, but it is the required stuff. So, yeah, like Chelsea said, I'm going to talk to you about how to post these, what needs to go on as far as ADA compliance, and where they might live as well. So, um, it is just so everybody's aware, and I think most of you are based on that poll. It is law that your websites do need to be ADA compliant. That law goes into effect this April, so next month, April 2026. However, smaller government agencies can postpone that a little bit. They won't have to be ADA compliant on their website until April of 2027. That's based on population size. So if you serve a population of 50,000 or greater, your deadline is next month. If it's less than 50,000, it'll be 2027. And Chelsea went ahead and put a link in the chat for you all with some resources for ADA compliance. But just as a kind of broad guideline to keep in mind that according to the law, everything is going to be required to meet what's called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. We'll also call that WCAG, and you need to have a AA rating according to WCAG. There's a lot of specifics that goes into that. We'll touch on a few of these later, but the guiding principle of web content that you're going to want to follow is the acronym POUR. What that stands for is perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So what does it mean to be perceivable? So content on your website needs to be able to be seen and heard with features like alt text, video captions, color contrast, and keyboard focus indicators. Operable, everything the user interacts with on your website functions correctly with all menus, buttons, and forms behaving as you would expect they should behave across different devices. So laptops, desktops, mobile devices, screen sizes, and when using the assistive technology that's very common these days. It needs to be understandable. Content needs to be written at a general reading level, and definitions provided for any acronyms that may be used. And robust. So content needs to be interpreted reliably by a wide variety of users and assistive technologies like screen readers. So, what does all that mean for you? The basics of making documents accessible. One thing that you see a lot is issues with headers and titles for your documents. Information structure and relationships on a web page or document should be set up in a way that both people and assistive technologies, like the screen readers, can understand. For example, headings shouldn't just look like a heading because of their size or color or how you styled them. They actually need to be designated as a heading kind of on the back end. So for like websites, that'll be HTML. For documents, that'll be, there's certain ways depending on the program to designate those sections with the correct tags. So for a heading, that would be like the H1 tag. For information further down in the document, that could be an H2 tag, etc. Like I mentioned, to add those tags on a website, you'll do that through the HTML. Most websites these days will have a visual editor that's kind of like typing into a Word document. Almost always that visual editor will have a way for you to designate sections of the website with tags, or whatever you're typing with a tag. And you'll usually see it as a little drop-down menu that you can change, and it'll have all the various tags available listed for you. On a Word document or a Google Doc, you can usually change the headings under the Styles tab, and across your little toolbar at the top, it'll have the styles that you can edit those. So headings best practices. Always start with the H1 tag, which will be your title. You'll never have more than one H1 tag on a document or web page. Headings, they need to provide a logical outline of the page's content. So it's a good idea to map out your headings before creating that new page or document. It's also really important not to skip any heading levels. So don't go from an H2 to an H4 without including that H3 in there somewhere. So that's headings. Talk a little bit about, we have some questions.
Yes, it looks like Christopher asks, so are you saying that we have to go through all of our past year's agendas and minutes, PDFs, and make sure that the creator used a heading indicator rather than making the text larger or bolder? It's a good question, Christopher.
That is a good question. We have been told that no, you do not have to go through your old content. It's just any content moving forward needs to be accessible. So any old blog posts that you might have, documents, that kind of thing, don't worry about those. I mean, if you've got the time, great. It's great to make sure they are accessible, but yes, that can be a Herculean task for a lot of you. So just moving forward, make sure your documents and web pages are accessible. Okay, so moving on to alt text. It's important for your documents and web pages, for any images on those, to have alt text. Unless, of course, the image is purely decorative. So if you've got like a nice, I don't know, border design on a document or something, that doesn't necessarily have to have alt text, but everything else really should. It's really important that you avoid any text-heavy images, like any PNGs or JPEGs. Program flyers is a big one that people like to have. All of the relevant information in those images must be included either in the alt text or on the web page somewhere nearby that image as regular text. The reason being is screen readers cannot read the text in images, so they are very problematic for anybody using a screen reader. And they if that important information is not included, they will miss out on that important information. So best practices for alt text is you want to make sure they're accurate. Alt text should convey the same information as the image itself. Relevant, rather than just describing what an image contains, provide context on how the image relates to the page content. You want to keep them succinct, so keep it short, ideally no more than one or two sentences, and not redundant. So avoid phrases like image of or picture of, and don't repeat text that appears near the image on the page. For linked images, the alt text needs to describe the link's purpose, not the icon's appearance. So for example, use alt text of print agenda instead of printer icon if it's a picture of a little printer that's so common for print buttons. Charts and graphs and infographics should all include meaningful alt text that conveys the same information presented visually. So if a chart, graph, or infographic is too complex for alt text alone, the data and details should be provided in a text format, either nearby or on a web page via a link to an accessible document containing the information. The other thing you want to consider is color contrast of your documents and web pages. So text, buttons, links, and any other visual elements like the aforementioned charts and graphs on your website must stand out clearly against their background colors. Do menu links require alt text captions? I'm not entirely sure what you're asking, so that could be a yes or a no, Crystal. If your menu links are generated with text, then they don't, which most modern websites will generate your menu links as a text. If they are images, though, then yes, they would require alt text. Try not to use images for your menus, though. That is just best practice to make sure they're text. Okay, so back to color contrast.
Hold up one second.
yeah.
Megan's got a question. If the graph or infographic is not necessary for the information, is it okay to artifact, even if a sighted person would gain from seeing the graphic?
Sorry, I am all of a sudden having some tech issues. Chelsea, do you want to answer that
Sure,
for me?
I will answer that one while Doug figures out what's going on with Zoom here. So if the graph or infographic is not necessary for the information, I think you're right on a line here, Megan. So the goal of ADA is that people with disabilities receive the exact same information in as close to the same way as is possible. So if it's purely decorative, like Doug mentioned, like a border or something that it's like, oh, that's kind of pretty to look at, but it doesn't really add anything of value to the document, then you are okay to mark that as decorative or have it as an artifact. But if it's like a pie chart and It's like kind of it's not, you list the information in text form below it. That's okay, but you should at least say that this is a pie chart that shows that 30% is here and 30% is here and 30% is here. So you do kind of want to make sure that you are getting as much information that a sighted person would see available to a screen reader. All right. Are you back, Doug?
Okay, thanks, Chelsea. Yeah,
Yep.
my browser's just decided to crash on me. So,
Okay.
okay, so going back to color contrast, you'll measure the contrast of any of your documents or web pages by comparing the color of the text or the element that's in the foreground with the background color used. So a higher ratio, so for instance, like brighter text against a darker background means you'll have better contrast. There's several ways to test that. The way we usually recommend is through a free online tool like the WebAIM Color Contrast Checker, which we'll put in a link to in the chat. But just as the old standard, black text on a white background is always going to be compliant, or white text on a black background as well. So just make sure, again, that whatever you're creating stands out and that information is properly conveyed. It's if somebody has vision issues, they're not going to have to strain to see what that information is that they need because your colors are too close together. So moving on to reading order, if the order of information on your web page is important, which it probably is, like a board document or agendas, what we're talking about today, make sure that it appears in the correct sequence when read by both users and assistive technologies. Going back to the heading tags, using those properly will really help making sure that reading order is correct. Sometimes when things like buttons get added to a page, it can mess up that reading order a little bit. So to help check and make sure that reading order isn't going to be disrupted by a button or any other content that you might be adding to that page, a neat trick is you can resize your browser window to see how that adjusts, or you can check it on like a mobile device, something just so that a page adjusts a little bit, and you can see how it wraps around just to make sure that button isn't jumping into the middle of your important text. Okay, moving on to the really fun one is PDF accessibility. There's been a lot of hubbub about this because a lot of people don't necessarily want to pay for the full version of Acrobat. And without the full version of Acrobat, it can be a little difficult to make sure your PDFs are accessible. So we're going to try to give you some pointers here on that if you don't have the full version of Acrobat. Yeah, Chelsea says try impossible, which is correct. So it's an uphill battle for sure. It helps if your PDF starts off with an accessible document. So if you're converting from a Word doc or a Google Doc to a PDF, as long as you make sure that that document is accessible when converting to a PDF, it's going to go a long way, and there will be a lot less work that you may have to do to that PDF if you're starting with that good source and you've already vetted that as being accessible. Once you do convert it to a PDF, though, it doesn't always work correctly, even if your source is accessible, so you have to go back and double check all your work, or Adobe's work, or Word's work, as it's the one doing the conversion. So just keep in mind that PDFs cannot be made accessible from scans or images. So if you're making a PDF from something that you've scanned in, it's not going to automatically do that for you. So like I see this quite a bit, scanned board documents, so scanned minutes. If you just upload that scan to your website, that will not be considered accessible. You have to go and retype all of that with your proper headings, reading order, all that kind of fun stuff to make sure that is accessible. Once you've got something converted, though, again, go back, make sure everything is tagged correctly. The tags, again, are ways of interpreting the content that screen readers will use. They need to know if it's a heading, a paragraph, if it's an image that they're looking at, a list, all that fun stuff. Again, make sure that logical reading order didn't break, and that the document flows correctly. And make sure you've got that title on there and it's tagged as an H1. Another issue that we see quite often is the title on the PDF, which is different from the title on your document. So you've got to make sure you've got that title set in Adobe, which it won't automatically pull that from what you have the title on your document or what you save the file as either. Make sure you've got your alt text in there. If you've got any images, that alt text doesn't always carry over. It should, but you know how these things go. A lot of times these programs don't do what they should. Your lists, tables, and forms all have to be tagged in there as well. So that can be a challenge, to put it mildly. Just the way Adobe works, it has a hard time with those. So if all that sounds very complex and yeah.
Before we move on to a little bit of a solution here, we've got, I think, a couple of questions coming in the chat. So
Yeah.
Terry asks, so the board chairs sign the minutes once approved. Those are what are scanned and then published, the signed docs in PDF. She wants suggestions since those are typically scanned.
That's a good question.
You could use a digital scan instead of printing that out and having them pen and ink scan it. But it
You
does,
mean a digital signature?
digital
Chelsea?
signature. Yes, that's what I meant.
Yeah, that was going to be one thing. Again, if you don't have the full version of Acrobat, that could be a challenge. If you've got, you could post those scans as an addition to the docs, as long as you've got what's in those scans written out, except for the signature, of course. I think that would probably be acceptable on the page. I don't have any other suggestions for that, though. It's kind of a tricky situation. Was there any other questions, Chelsea, that you noticed?
Nope, just that one. Do minutes have to be signed? A follow-up question, and maybe that one should go to Clay.
Yes, that would be a question for Clay if he's there.
Yes, I am here. Do minutes have to be signed? No, they have to be approved and noted in your minutes, which are an official document. So the minutes of the next meeting, when you make an action to approve the previous minutes, that is legal action. The documents are, or the minutes are a legal document at that point in time. I do recommend that they be signed, as Terry just said. That just says, hey, we saw these, we approved them, we're signing off on them. So I recommend it. Do they have to be? That's a question.
All right. Thanks, Clay. So any other questions before we move on?
But do the signed ones have to be posted or just the content? And I would say just the content could be posted as long as the content is accessible. And remember, you're not required to post minutes on your website. Those are not required. They're recommended, but not required.
And if
I concur with Chelsea here.
they are posted, they do need to be accessible.
All right.
Okay. So going over all of that with Adobe, because a lot of people don't have the full version and it's very complicated, we're going to give you an alternative way of posting your minutes to your website, which is creating some sort of post. WordPress calls it posts. Other platforms may call it blog. It just depends what you're using for your website. So creating a post instead of posting a PDF, saying the word post a lot. So what that looks like is it's just like, you go in there, create a post on your website. It'll have the text editor. You can just paste all of that, the board information in there, the doc information in there, and that way you are able to edit those headings and alt tags if there's images much easier than if you were trying to do it in a PDF. Like I mentioned before, headings and alt tags and reading order, that's all easily adjustable in that editor on your web page. So instead of paying for the full version of Adobe, you can just do it that way. So what Chelsea's got there on the screen is an example that Chelsea very kindly created for you all of how we could potentially create those posts on our eBranch platform. If you're part of our eBranch platform, if you also use WordPress, it'll be very similar. Other platforms other than WordPress might be a little bit different. So the way that we've got it set up, the agendas and minutes are all what WordPress calls blog posts that will populate automatically on that page that you see there. Any notices of the board meetings are at the top of the page, and you can just update those for the full year if you know those dates. If there's a special or executive session only meeting, you can also add that to a blog post. And that'll give your patrons the appropriate notice there. Now the setup of these posts is almost exactly like you do in a Word or a Google Doc. Again, you've got that visual text editor. Your heading H1 goes in the title field of your post, and from there you just fill out the rest of the information as needed. The tags and reading order should be built into the post itself, and you should only have to pay attention to the alt text if you're including images or graphics. Once you copy and paste your content, you'll just hit publish and you're done. If it's set up correctly on the back end, like I said, it'll populate automatically and it'll be there for the world to see. It's a lot easier than fixing a PDF. If you're on our eBranch program, it's also free. So another advantage there. If you're not on eBranch, like I mentioned, the ability to create a post is pretty standard on just about any web platform out there, especially if you're using WordPress, which is what we use for eBranch. So it'll have that ability built in. So it should be part of what you're already paying for as far as your website goes.
And Real quick, Christopher asks in the chat, does the post have to be the document or can it be a recreation of a physical copy?
So it would just be a recreation of the physical copy, because if you've got a physical copy, by nature, posting it to your website is going to be a recreation. As long as the information is identical, you're covered there. All right. Was there any other questions before I move on?
No,
Okay,
that's the only one.
perfect. So if you're on our eBranch program, I know a lot of you have probably been contacted by us to get your ADA compliance going. If you decide you want to do your board documents this way through posts instead of doing PDFs, you can reach out to either Chelsea or myself. We'd be more than happy to help configure this for you on your end. It does take a little bit of tinkering on our part. It won't automatically display like Chelsea has here, but we can pretty quickly and easily get it set up for you if you would like. So please feel free to reach out to us. Okay, so let's talk about your social media presence now. All the online accessibility guidelines do extend to your social media. Any social media presence that you maintain is required to be accessible. In general, just make sure you're doing the following: add alt text to your images on your social medias. If you're posting videos, make sure you're using closed captioning. If you're using hashtags and they contain multiple words, make sure you capitalize the first letter of each word in that hashtag, and ensure that your images and graphics are meeting the minimum color contrast ratios. You can directly link your board information page in a social media post, or you can share web links for the specific agenda or notice. If you include a picture of your agenda or notice on a social media site, you must write all that information out in the alt text of that image. If you don't, you're preventing people, again, with screen readers from understanding what's in that content. Best practice is just to link back to your accessible document from social media. That way you don't have to worry about all of that, rather than trying to make sure those posts are ADA compliant on your social media, because you've already done that on your website, theoretically. Okay, how are we doing on time, Chelsea? Do we want to do a quick demo, or?
Yeah, I think we've got time for a quick demo. I will stop sharing my screen and let you share your screen if you wanted to do a walkthrough of an eBranch site here.
Sure.
And then Christopher did ask in the chat, and you can see if you can expand on my answer. Can you recommend any tools for checking PDF compliance? We use, again, Adobe's built-in editor. I know that there are free tools. A lot of those automated ones, unfortunately, miss a lot. But I don't know, Doug, if you have any better suggestions for that.
I unfortunately don't. It's just so hard to get those adequately checked. Even like Chelsea mentioned, Adobe's built-in editor still misses things, and when the paid version is not doing a great job, it's hard to find a free version that'll do a good job. So yeah, it's tough, and that's kind of why we're recommending that you go the blog post route for your board documents instead of PDFs too. So sorry, not a great answer, but that's what it is. Okay, let me share my screen here. Maybe, again, having more tech issues. Of course, the tech guy is the one with the tech issues.
Breaks entirely, I can do it.
Yeah, no, I think almost there.
And while Doug is pulling this up, if you've got more questions, please feel free to put those into the chat as well. We are happy to answer questions for any of the sections that we've touched on so far, if something's cropped up in the interim for y'all.
Okay, maybe I fibbed a bit. Okay, there we go. All right, so we've got Chelsea's page that she created. Like I mentioned, this would take a little bit of setup to kind of show you what that looks like. In the Elementor editor here, Chelsea's created a library board information page. She's used mostly some text widgets. For instance, this is the heading widget. She's appropriately got it labeled as H1. She's got the subheading here, H2, the listed dates as a paragraph. But the important part down here is going to be this post section. So you can add this widget to a page to automatically pull those posts, and you can add tags to your posts. So if you're using your posts for other things like events, in addition to the board meeting minutes, you can set it to only be pulling the agenda and minutes posts through tags. Again, we can help you set all of this up on the back end. Once you've got it set, you're good to go. And then you only need to worry about posting the actual documents. So to do that, if you're familiar with WordPress and its posts, you'll go to the post sections at the back end. Just click Add Post. And from there, just like adding a normal post, you put the title in, however you want to label your agendas and minutes. You can just, like we mentioned, copy and paste the rest of the text down in here, this editor section. Like I said, it'll let you select the tags. So right now you can see up here, it's doing the paragraph tag. If I wanted to change that to a subheading, I could change it to heading 2. It automatically does it. Once you've got everything in there, you just hit publish, and then it will appear on this page here.
On this one, Doug, can you go back to the post?
Yeah.
Yeah, on the categories is how you would select it to move over, so it just shows up on the board page. So you'll notice one of the categories is library board, so you would select that, and then it would populate onto that existing page. That's true for a lot of WordPress sites, but especially for eBranch. And categories are just nice for search engines and things as well, because it helps pull things up in your search engines.
Yeah, so I guess I can go ahead and publish this since it's just an example site, and then we'll show you what happens. Maybe we'll show you what happens. Okay, so then you can see it automatically populates there as the most recent post there, and you can adjust how those display as far as what order you want to go in. And you're also able to, if you've got something important that you need to pin to always show as the first spot, you can set it to do that as well. So any questions on that?
Not seeing any in the chat, but you can feel free to put questions in now. Otherwise, we can move to our breakout rooms where we can work on setting up templates and asking more questions too. So.
Lots of questions. Well, Terry, like we said, we're happy to meet with you and hash some of this stuff out.
100%. All right. I think we can go ahead and set up those breakout rooms, William, and get those launched, and you will be automatically moved in, and you can work on a template, or if questions are cropping up that you want to get answered in a smaller group, you will be good to go, and we will join you in the breakout rooms. Plenty more. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for coming today. All of our contact information is on the screen. If you're just getting back from the breakout rooms, if you have questions, anything like that, you can feel free to put those in the chat if anything cropped up last minute. Otherwise, we can let you all go for the afternoon. But if there are any other topics or anything else that you would like us to cover, if you want to do round 2 of this, that feedback survey is in the chat, and your honest feedback really helps me as I create more of these and drag more of my coworkers into helping me with these. So fill that out if you can. But I will hold for just a few seconds to see if there are any more questions. More work and more learning opportunities, Terry. Yes, I'm afraid it's probably a balance there. Thank you. All right, not seeing any other questions. So we will just wrap this on up. You guys have a great afternoon, and we will catch you at the next tech workshop here real soon.